So my research addresses the field of, or is within the field of socio-technical transitions, which is a fancy way of saying that we have energy systems and transport systems and food production systems that are incredibly complex. And what we need to do is transition from the current very high carbon intensive ways of doing things to low carbon ways. So at the moment, people are driving around in cars with internal combustion engines. How do we switch to electric vehicles? How do we switch to mass public transport? So that's a socio-technical transition. My research has looked at resistance to socio-technical transitions, especially in the energy sector. And the case study I used was Australia, which traditionally has used coal to get electricity, but could, and I would argue should, have switched to renewables quite quickly after discovering the problem of climate change. Australia didn't, and what my research looks at is the way that the people who were benefiting from the coal-fired system maintained the coal-fired system by preventing policy innovation. So the key take-home messages from my talk today is that socio-technical transitions are really complex and they take a long time to unfold, decades or centuries, not years or election cycles. Now, we already knew that about socio-technical transitions. That's common knowledge. The takeaway, the specific contribution of my research is to look at one issue over a long time, so in my case it was almost 30 years, and to follow how the actors within that transition period shift tactics, shift coalitions, and adapt as public pressures grow and decline. And the key message is that just because someone is standing in the way of a transition to a low-carbon economy, and some people might like to frame them as evil or obstructive, doesn't mean that they're stupid, and it doesn't mean that they're easy to beat. They're very good at shifting tactics. So perhaps the best analogy is one of my favorite movies, which is Terminator 2. You have a big, hulking Arnold Schwarzenegger robot that you can identify, and in the second movie, he's the good guy. But the opponent in the second movie is this liquid metal shape-shifting thing. And I would argue that incumbents are much more like the second one that can constantly shift shape, learn, adapt, than what we think of an incumbent as a big Arnold model. I think the implications for policymakers is to understand that opponents of change are very good at gaming the system. They're very good at setting up think tanks, at releasing economic modelling at exactly the right time, making alliances with journalists, making alliances with trade unions to slow things down, and that outright denial of climate change is actually relatively rare. Companies have learnt that that costs them political capital and reputation, so they shift tactics. The other group that I'd like to look at my research are the social movements, because I think my story tells my research tells a story of the failure of social movements to understand what game they were playing, and they've always constantly brought numbers and facts, and this is actually far more of an emotional and cultural struggle than they want to believe that it is. And as we've seen with sort of Donald Trump and other actors, they've turned the climate debate into an identity politics issue, and they've been very successful, not in convincing anyone to change their mind, but just slowing down progress. And that is important. We need to understand that this is what's happened, and we need to respond to that somehow.